All right, it's review time. I think I did really well this year. I wonder if there's a chance maybe to get promoted. I have no idea, but this is exciting. Hi, Francois. Here, I have your review right here. All right, great. Let's see. Wait, what? Is something wrong? No. Yes, well, I just thought you had said I was doing great. Of course you're doing great. That's what the review says. You're meeting expectations. But this just says I'm only meeting expectations and I need to improve my communication skills. Yep. Meeting expectations means you're doing great. I mean, I thought that when you said I was doing great, that it meant I was maybe up for promotion. Oh, you're not quite at the next level yet, but you're doing great. Okay, so what exactly am I missing? You just have to keep working hard. Sure, but any specifics? Oh, you're just missing some stuff. You'll absolutely get there if you keep working hard. So, what am I missing? Stuff. What stuff? Well, stuff. But I've done stuff. Oh, really? I I guess I missed that. Okay, well, now you do. Can you like maybe update my review to reflect that? Unfortunately, the review went through HR and has been finalized and approved, so I can't change it until the next cycle. All right. Well, then I'm quitting. Oh, why are you quitting? Did we do anything wrong? I didn't realize you were unhappy. What can we do to keep you? Well, sure. Update my review with the stuff I did. Oh, sorry, that's like the one thing I can't do. That's company process. I hope you can understand. Well, then here have my resignation. So, good luck. What just happened? So this is a situation that I see happen all the time. It happened to me too in the past. There's a lot of problems with the way most managers and most companies handle employee performance reviews. They are very opaque. Generally, employees don't get to see the process and the rules that dictate how they're being done. They're fairly one-sided. A manager will write them and deliver them. You as the employee receive it. Your involvement might be limited to a one-time self-review. You might contribute during your regular one-on-ones, but that's fairly indirect. You're not directly involved. And they're very anxiety-inducing. Until you get your review, you don't know what to expect. Are you about to get promoted? Are you going to be put on a performance improvement plan? Are you doing great or not? You just don't know. One-on-one discussions are often misleading at best. Your manager might tell you that you're doing great, but until they sit down and look at the data, they don't really know themselves. This is made even worse because your review might have a direct impact on your compensation and essentially on your quality of life outside of work. They're usually very infrequent. They'll happen every 6 or 12 months. If you need to correct something, you might have to wait until the next cycle to see it reflected. Your impact and all the work that you do over the year is essentially brought down to one single event that usually has significant amount of recency bias. And they're fairly static. If you disagree or need to change something, or if you receive feedback that you will act upon, well, again, it might be several months or even up to a year before you get to see the result of that. For all these reasons, people tend to really hate employee performance reviews. But it doesn't have to be that way. Reviews are a tool. They're there to help you grow your career, nurture your strength, work on your weaknesses, and generally to know where you stand. They're there to help you know what you have to do to get to the next level. So is there a better way to handle them? Well, of course there is, and in this video I'm going to try and show you how. Alright, so we already went over what can make reviews less than ideal. So how do we make them better? Well, first we need to go over what their goal and purpose are. So we do reviews so that employees and their employers know where they stand. It's a tool to help people grow. Folks want to know what they need to improve, what they can do better, and what they need to do to get to the next level. And of course, they also want to know what they should do less of. Here's what I think would make a great performance review system. And essentially, it's all the opposite of how most of them are done. First, they should be as transparent as possible. Folks should know at any given point where they stand, what they're expected of them, but also what are their expectations of their current role and their expectations of the next level. It should be an iterative process. It should have plenty of opportunities to challenge it, to point out missing information and potentially mistakes. And there should be a clear escalation path when disagreements can't be sorted out. It should be a collaborative effort. Of course, while the responsibilities of the manager and their report will be different, they should be working together throughout the entire process leading to the review. And it's key that the manager and the report should be in sync before the official company mandated review has to be done, because when the reviews are done, they're often set in stone and it's too late to adjust them. All right, so what does that look like in practice? So what I've seen work best is to keep a shared document that a manager and the report are going to be collaborating on. So here's an example of a spreadsheet that I've been using. So again, this should be a collaborative effort. So you should go over this pretty frequently, maybe every 2 to 4 weeks, minimum every month, else it kind of defeats the purpose. And each of the manager's reports should have their own, it's their own space. So before we go over all of this, let's talk about the responsibilities. So it's not realistic to expect a manager to have 100% perfect insight into everything the reports are doing. And that's often why people feel underserved by performance reviews processes. They feel that they have done so much more than what has been reported. It's also how people feel underappreciated. And it's not because the companies don't really appreciate them, but it's really because it's unrealistic to expect a manager to properly represent 5, 10, or more people accurately. So what I prefer to do is split those responsibilities. The employee will be responsible for keeping track of what they've been working on and what they've been doing. The manager's role is to coach them on how to do this. It's really common for people to omit some stuff or to undersell themselves. The manager should also be responsible for calibrating or interpreting these achievements, their impact, and where do they fit in the career ladder for the employee's current level. So in short, the report's responsibility is to keep track of what they do, and the manager's responsibility is to interpret that data and to coach and provide opportunities for growth. All right, so then back to the spreadsheet. So first here, we have the work and achievement tab. That one is really simple, and it's the primary place where the employee is going to be interacting with this process. The goal is to essentially have one place to keep track of everything that's been happening. If your company is using a tool like 15.5, which I really like, you can look it up. It's a tool to keep track of weekly tasks and provide an easy way for managers and reports to collaborate and discuss about them. That could replace this, but not everywhere has that. So this is the free way to do this. So anyway, the report would be responsible for filling this up. So in the middle here, you have tasks. So you could have any example. So maybe fix an accessibility bug related to some button. Maybe they met with the tech lead to discuss the project Barbaz. Maybe they authored an RFC for a new library, right? Or developed project X end to end. You just put essentially anything that you've been working on that has any impact. And it's not just technical things either. Maybe you did 3 interviews this cycle, or maybe you did some campus recruiting, right? So anything that could potentially have an impact on the company or their environment. On the left, we have the type of contributions. And here we have a driver or contributor. And the reason I have that is because time and time again, I see that people will only report things that they've been actively themselves working on, code that they shipped, or things that they did, like interviewing. But especially as you get more senior, but even before that, a lot of the impact you have on the team, on the organization, can be more indirect. Maybe you helped a colleague debug a really hard problem, but it was not a ticket you were working on yourself. Or maybe you taught a new junior engineer how to work with React. And those often don't get reported. So driver here is when you're actually doing the thing. Maybe it's the ticket that you ship, the code that you push the PR for. But contributor is anything you're involved in, even if it's completely indirect. On the right, pretty self-explanatory, we have the status. Is it in progress? Is it complete? Is it on hold? And the reason for that is because if people only put things when they're completed, they will often forget, or they will miss a lot of the nuance or the steps that led to something being complete. And finally on the right, that's optional, but I put a column for impact. It's often a lot more meaningful to keep track of stuff considering their impact. So maybe you fixed an issue and made the application 30% more performant for the top 50% of users or something. And that is a lot more meaningful than just saying, I fixed the bug, because now you have data to back it up. That can be difficult, but if you have it, do put it there. So the goal of this tab of the spreadsheet is to make sure that all the data gets captured throughout the cycle so that we don't forget. And this is going to help with recency bias, the issue where often when you do your yearly review, the only thing you remember is stuff that happened in the last couple of months. So something I always tell my report is that I will try my best to represent them if they don't fill this up, but then they're depending on my memory instead of depending on theirs. And my memory is pretty bad, so they probably don't want to do that. All right, so now we're going to head over to the development plan tab. So this one's a bit more complicated. In this one, I pretty much replicated a company's career ladder. In this case, I just Googled for some that were publicly available. So I believe this one is the career ladder for Duo. And this is for an hypothetical employee who would be an L3, level 3 engineer. So the text is not particularly important here. It's just an example. And you would just use your own company's career ladder. So if we start on the left, we have the employee's current level. So here, again, it's an L3 technical track. You could have multiple ones here if, let's say, it's an employee who wants to become a manager, and then you could keep track of what they're doing for both roles. Now, for the current level, we also have the various categories of behaviors that are dictated by the career ladder, as well as examples of these skills and behaviors. I also put the scope for the current level because frequently in engineering, different levels have different scope. So an L3 here is scope to team, L2 could be scope to just a project. And this will help you interpret the skills and behaviors in the next column. Now, really important, and I put that below, is I also have the expectations and skills required for the next level, in this case, the L4 technical track. This is how we're going to keep track of how the person is doing toward the next level, and that will help them understand how close they are to their promotion. So beyond that, and more to the right, the spreadsheet is now split in two. For self, so the employee, and manager. self-explanatory. Each person will mostly work on their own assigned column, but of course, there's nothing blocking you from spilling over. So let's start with the manager section. Here we have the demonstrated examples. And the goal of that is to take stuff from the previous tab, the work and achievements tab, and to associate them with the various expectations and examples of skills and behaviors from the career ladder. So the goal is to keep a running tab of evidences on how the person is doing in each category. When certain rows don't have much, then it gives a clear message of which part the report should be focusing on. And when it's possible, and we touched on that in the previous tab, associating behavior with impact can really strengthen the evidence here. Somebody's impact is a behavior factored by context or by their environment. And by having all of that, you can make the difference. Like, somebody fixed a bug, but was that bug just a nice to have, or did it fix an issue that will allow us to make 10% more sale? The difference between the two would be massive. So let's go and just put some examples here. So maybe for helping improve the code structure and maintainability, maybe the person implemented prettier, saving X hours of time that the team would otherwise be spending on code formatting. Here, maybe they're the onboarded the new co-op as an example of mentoring. Then maybe they met with the tech lead of team B about the current company priorities. Now you could go and fill this up. Obviously, again, this would be iterative and you'd go over this frequently. So you'd be filling this sheet over many months. So one thing I like to do is to color code this. So maybe like for this category, for guiding team and improve code structure with the company's expectations, this is now meeting expectations, and I'm going to put it on green. But maybe here I have not seen this person breaking down high-level stories from specs a lot. So maybe I'll put that in red so that they understand that they have to focus on this. Maybe meeting the tech leads was a good start, but I expect to see more of it. So then maybe I'll make it yellow. And then you have a clear overview of what you need to be focusing on. So there's also the column to the right, the push it further. And this is where I, as a manager, would give my reports ideas on how they can either improve for their current level or how they can start reaching for the next level. So maybe they are not currently yet an expert that demonstrate mastery of competencies and recognizes an authority on the subject by their peers of leader. So maybe I would consider that they need consider giving a presentation on React hooks. And this could be a good suggestions on how they can demonstrate this mastery. And I could do that for everywhere that I perceive a gap. So now if the report wants, they can fill the gaps because maybe I'm missing data, maybe the project and achievement tab was not filled, or maybe I forgot something, and they will be able to add them to their own column. And that's going to help fill these gaps so that I'm not missing anything. And of course, because they're not a manager, they might not be an expert in how to interpret the career ladder. And so having it in their own column, I can use it as a source of data, and maybe I'll move it or put it at the right place. So I like to have this notes and follow-up columns so that I can give some to-dos or some action items. So maybe my report puts in here that they are an expert in JavaScript. And that's good, but that's not an evidence that I can use in a review. So I could put here as a to-do, find an example where you taught JavaScript to your colleagues. Maybe an example is just too weak, or it needs more quantifiable impact to be solid. And this is how I'm going to communicate that. Okay, so there's something else that's important here, and I put it at the top left here, is these skills or competencies in a good career ladder should not be a checklist. It should not feel like the employee just needs to put one example in each of these rows and they're automatically meeting expectations. Or same with the next level, that if they do one behavior of every row, they automatically get promoted. The bar for meeting expectations or promotion depends a lot on your whole organizations and how it gets interpreted and how the promotion process works. And this is a place where the spreadsheet does not replace communication. The manager and their report need to talk and go over this. They need to understand what actually are the expectations. The spreadsheet is there to gather data and evidence, but it does not replace these discussions. Like, it's very possible that a company expects you to be more T-shaped and to be really good in some of these things, and it's completely fine if you omit other rows entirely. So as a manager, one should make that painfully clear. So next, and probably the most important columns, are the ratings. And there are such columns for both the manager and for the report. So here the ratings will of course depend on what your organization uses. Maybe it's a scale like 1 to 5. Maybe it's qualitative, like meet expectations, above expectations. Here I used meet expectations, require attention, and below expectations, which is similar to what I've seen a lot in the field. So both the manager and their report have their own column for this. So the idea is to provide a rating to discuss as if the cycle was ending today. Like, if I had to give you your review today, what would be your rating with the data that I have? So now here I have them broken down by the various categories. Again, that depends on how your company works. And for the top level one, I would assume here it's the overarching rating. But again, that can change a lot. So let's say based on these evidences, I feel like this engineer is meeting expectations in this skill. In communication, it probably requires attention, and maybe it's meeting expectations for leadership. And so their overall rating may be here because of how this company's bar work, they are meeting expectations. Another report would be setting their own rating. And I recommend that this happens in a one-on-one live, because this document will be shared, and if you put the rating on a Friday afternoon asynchronously and the employee sees the rating and they disagree with it, they're going to have a ton of anxiety all the way through Monday. So they would then rate themselves. So maybe they think that they are meeting expectations everywhere, and maybe they're even setting some for the next level. So here where this gets interesting, because now there's a couple of situations that can happen. The first situation is, let's say everybody had put the same ratings on both sides, then everyone's in agreement, there's no surprises, we can just go and move on. Job well done. Maybe the manager gave higher rating than the report. At that point, it's an opportunity to explain how folks are evaluated and what are the expectations for their current level. There might even be a need for a discussion on imposter syndrome, or how the report is being too hard on themselves. Maybe the manager misunderstood stuff too and overestimated the impact, and the report's actually right. And finally, there's another case that can happen. The unfortunate one is, what if the report rated themselves higher than the manager did? So this is the time to have these tough conversations. So the manager and report should have a discussion on the evidence that was provided, on what the manager find is missing or was not strong enough. Again, are some of the behaviors being misinterpreted? Is there stuff that is just missing from the spreadsheet and the report is thinking about but forgot to talk about it? On the other hand, maybe the report is underestimating how high the bar is and what is expected of them at their level. Or they could have just misunderstood how the career ladder works. Remember the example I gave earlier, this is not a checklist. If that discussion did not happen, Maybe they really thought that putting a single behavior in every row was sufficient. It's not. And now you can have that discussion. The great thing about this is that you can tackle these misunderstandings and these issues as they come up over the entire cycle, over the 6 to 12 months. You don't have to have these discussions all in one shot during review delivery when it could be really hard to change anything. Okay, and now this is a good place to go on a tangent. What happens if the manager and their report just can't come to an agreement? Well, this is where you need to have a clear escalation path for the employee to follow. Like, what if the report think they deserve a better rating, but what if the manager is confident that their review is accurate? Then what? So usually the manager, since it's their job and it's their responsibility, they should have a bit more context on how the process works, and they should have the final say. But what if they're wrong? So again, you need a clear escalation path, and I highly recommend that this is made clear long before any problem arises, at the very beginning when you start implementing a process like this one. So an example of such an escalation path is, if my report disagrees with me and we just can't reconcile, well, they should then go to my own boss, maybe like a higher level director. Now they have that spreadsheet and they have the evidences and the data to go over with them. So it should be pretty easy to see if they're correct and their own manager is being too harsh or too strict. If that doesn't help, the next step could be to discuss it with an HR partner. They should also consider discussing it with other managers in the organizations, or maybe with some of their peers to see what they think about the situation. And again, having all that evidence removes the kind of guts feeling involved, like, because otherwise if you go to your friends and you ask them what they think, well, they're your friends, so they might just take your side even though they don't have all the data, and that's less than helpful. And if all else fails, even with all the evidence, well, then maybe the employee in this case has to accept that they're the one who was wrong. Okay, so let's say now you filled up this entire sheet. Then what's next? Well, that's the best part. When the official review season happens, for the manager, writing the review for all the reports is just copy pasting from the spreadsheet, maybe adding a little bit of flair and a little bit of text for summarizing it, but that's it, because we've done the work over the entire cycle. Same thing for the self-review for the employee here. All they need to do is to take the evidences from the sheet, and that becomes their self-review. The goal of a self-review is to make sure the manager has all the information they need to write the review, but they already had it because you've been iterating on this for months. So the only purpose of the self-review then is to make sure there's a paper trail with HR in case there are issues down the road. At that point, everybody knows where they stand. Everybody had a chance to agree or disagree, so there should be almost nothing left. If there's an opportunity for a promotion, well, all the evidence is there to submit, so there's not going to be a problem with a lack of data. And how does the actual review delivery looks like? Well, that one is kind of funny. It takes 30 seconds. I've done this many times. We just meet at the designated time and go, yup, your review is exactly what we've been talking about for the last many months. And the report is like, yup, that's what I expected. It takes 30 seconds and then we can move on. So of course, no system is perfect. And when it comes to things like promotions, they often have to be submitted to a committee as part of the review cycle. And all the people involved in that were not part of this iteration, and they might disagree. And that is out of the control of the manager. And I find that this happens a lot less often when you're following this methodology, because you work so hard to gather all the evidence and make sure that it lines up with the company process, that it's rare that there's any adjustment that need to happen. So again, not perfect, but in my experience, it's a million times better than what most managers do. It takes away a lot of the anxiety and sometimes even anger that can happen when reviews are not what folks expect. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully that was helpful. This is basically the way that I like to handle employee performance reviews, and I found that it really solves for transparency and for managing expectations. It makes it so much easier to have hard discussions, hard conversations when they need to happen. By making the whole thing more collaborative, it gives a lot more agency to employees, and it demystifies the whole review process. If you have any thoughts on how we could do this even better, I'd love to hear them. Please put them in the comments. Or if you have any anecdotes or any stories where a process like this could have helped you, again, do let me know. And on that note, that's it for today, so I'll see you in the next one.